Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a profitable and sustainable future for farms and rural communities alike. Almost 2 years worth of episodes already. I cannot believe it's been 100 episodes, and I just want to say thank you so much, especially for those that have been listening for a long time and continue to find value in what we're doing here at AgCulture. I really appreciate all the support. And today I had the honor and privilege of interviewing Anastasia Volkova. Now, Anastasia is a visionary leader shaping the category of agricultural resilience. She has more than a decade of experience in academia and business, creating innovative software solutions. Anastasia holds a PhD in aerospace engineering and has been named a 2023 UBS Global Visionary, one of BBC's top 100 women, and is on the Time 100 Next list. Now, I had a great conversation with Anastasia that I'm sure will interest you if you are all interested in the regenerative movement or farming resiliency. This was a great opportunity to hear more about that from an expert in the field. So stay tuned for this episode with Anastasia. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast. And today I have the pleasure and privilege of interviewing Anastasia Volkova, who is the CEO of Regrow. And she's here to talk today about AI-powered platforms with an aim to make agriculture resilient. So welcome, Anastasia. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Paul, it's great to be with you on AgCulture. I've followed how you weave the stories of farming communities, technology, and access to finance to build resilience, and excited to add to this catalog of human wisdom.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I want to start first, as I usually do, with a little background on yourself. And you have, you're not originally from the U.S. You grew up originally in Ukraine.
I grew up in Ukraine in the city, but my parents had a small plot of land outside of the city, and my godmother actually had a small farm in the middle of the country, where the soil is really black, the hills are rolling, and the waters are pristine. So I was close to agriculture, but my family wouldn't consider themselves farmers because they weren't just working on a farm or dependent on it from a subsistence perspective.
What did that do to mold you and how you operate as a founder today? That grounding in that first initial experience with farming and agriculture.
Great question. I think some of the stories we can only make sense of looking at them backwards, or as Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And This is one of those moments for me, because when I was in my PhD, I realized that if I wanted an impact project that would help people globally, which I'd been wanting but by that point since I was 16, so it was already, the first almost 10 years of me looking for an idea and working for other startups and founders to understand how the startup kitchen works. Then looking at the Earth observation data, just staring back at me, it dawned on me that what we're trying to protect is the Earth. And I actually had such a deep connection with it that I had an intuitive understanding of the agricultural systems compared to any other area of human nature interaction that I could have contributed to. And that brought me all the way back to how mom would tell me how to plan certain things and how to look after them. And I would always do this under her supervision. So I didn't consider myself someone who can just freely grow food, but it was so clear to me that what the agronomists are trying to do on the massive swath of land when they're helping farmers is the same thing that mom was trying to do on our little plot of land that was less than an acre with this agroforestry system that she had set up, growing tomatoes under fruit trees, all with composting and without the use of a lot of artificial and synthetic inputs. It just clicked that the solution was in both of those things at the same time. If we could scale what now we call regenerative agriculture, what she was doing on a small farm, and do it with that care and benefit to the producers, that would benefit the planet.
Yeah, and that's a great grounding for what you originally co-founded, which is your company Regrow. So give us a little look into the life and the formation of that company and how it came to be.
Absolutely. So we just covered that I do not have green thumbs like my mother, but I delighted myself in eating and enjoying the 51 varieties of tomatoes that they grew and seeing how different they were. At the same time, the people in my family who grew that food, mom, grandma, grandpa, they were all engineers and teachers. They were not agronomists and agricultural professionals. They just felt that it's important to tend to the earth and to raise children in that environment where they had access to getting themselves dirty and seeing how the food grows. Going to farmers market and always meeting the farmers themselves and getting the produce from them. That is one half of the equation. The other half is, of course, that engineering acumen. The advice that I was given is to go into engineering school because I could do anything with the technical degree. It would set me up for working in technical organizations and non-technical organizations. And I had a feeling I wanted to contribute to climate solutions. I had no idea how one does that. The world just started talking about it back then. And the way that my path has evolved in order for me to bring those two parts of me was serendipitous. I went to Australia to start my PhD in remote sensing. We just discussed that staring at that data made it evident to me that agriculture is the industry that I wanted to get involved in. And I had a friend within that, a group of friends actually, within the project at the university where we were exploring this idea of how could we create each an impact project for ourselves as PhD students. And her dad was a farmer in Australia. And I asked, who would usually help your dad with these decisions? And she said, an agronomy firm. And I started looking up what are the agronomy firms. I called the one that had the biggest and most obvious ads, Nutrien. And it turned out that's a huge company globally that employs so many agronomists and so many farmers. And I had no idea. I just called head of digital agriculture at the time. He was a Canadian living in Australia. He picked up the phone, said, wow, this is interesting. Like, is this really something you're doing for your research? Can you come out and we can talk about it? And 30 agronomists later, I had a proof. Well, 30 agronomists that said yes. I had to talk to many more. But 30 agronomists that said yes, I had the proof that they were equally excited that this was something that could make a difference in both how the farmers managed the land and how they advised those producers.
Well, that's an amazing start. And so that was the foundation of it. So where did you take it from there then?
It evolved so much with the same mission and a vision to help farmers be economically better positioned in the global food system and within their families and communities. I also wanted to tackle the environmental opportunity of not using as much synthetic inputs on the large farms. We evolved from giving this information solely to agronomists that worked with farmers to then joining forces with multiple other companies. So 2 M&As later, we get Regrow, where the suite of intellectual property tools that we have spans everything from my initial research vertical, remote sensing, machine learning, and AI, to agronomic, crop and soil models, all the way to decision support systems and enterprise dashboards. The evolution there was via a common thread that in each company that works in the supply chain, there is someone who cares about what they buy, about the quality of it, about the livelihood of the farmer. And by finding those people sequentially and understanding how our information can help them do their job better, whether they were a buyer at a big food manufacturer, whether they were a supplier to a manufacturer who was aggregating the grain, for example, from so many farmers, whether they were at a co-op, we started taking this information downstream further and further and further. And we actually understood that it was a lot more valuable downstream than it was upstream. So then almost the whole business model flipped. We were just focusing on the farmer, although my objective was always to bring the farmer more money. And then 5 years in, we found what is the foundation of the Regrow product market fit right now, which is serving the food companies and fiber and apparel companies that work with agriculture supply chains to give them the insight into what's happening in the supply sheds, what the farmers need, and help them route the funding to help the farmers transition and manage their risk. And so we can say that we are where we wanted to be, driving impact and dollars to farmers.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that funding aspect that you brought up, and kind of curious to dig a little bit deeper into that.
Absolutely. One of the ways that I see it is that if you do not have a common way of assessing, quantifying, valuing the outcome between the funder of that outcome and between the producer, that outcome doesn't exist because there's no agreement. It's like if you can't agree on the property value, whether it's a piece of land or a car or a real estate piece of property, if you can't agree, there's no transaction. So MRV is what makes it possible. Measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. It's just a fancy acronym. Everyone refers to it as MRV now. 5 years ago, rarely people said it. But MRV enables us to actually capture the impact and almost act as a financial mechanism and tool in order for farmers to say, this is what I'm looking to create. These are the practices I'm looking to adopt. This is how much I need to be paid in order to actually be interested in the transition. And then the off-takers can say, yes, that's reasonable, or even offer it to a farmer in the first place, which is usually how it happens. The off-takers say, we'll pay you this many tons. These tons can come from all these different practices. Regrow will evaluate and quantify the relationship between the two. They can also get paid for the practice. It works better in some cases, so that the farmer and the off-taker can actually risk share, creating this entity, this environmental outcome, capturing it, and making it so it's credible, scalable, and auditable for the corporate, and tangible but flexible for the producer. Actually creates the money flow.
Yeah, so not only are you providing the platform, you're really providing the transparency that's needed in order to make the transaction real.
Absolutely. I don't believe that without the MRV and the trusted infrastructure, the transactions would scale as much as they did and would be able to scale as much as we need them to scale in the future.
What's that growth looked like over the last couple of years for farmer involvement and I guess corporate involvement? Is that really kind of taken off now, or was it slow to get started, or what was that trajectory like?
Candidly, we've seen three distinctly different pieces of the adoption already. First, there were early adopters really interested in coming in, and they were our earliest customers, and they remain our partners right now. Then there was the Biden administration push as far as the US is concerned, and it also was coordinated globally with a number of different regulatory and funding mechanisms that were designed to push climate smart and regenerative agriculture that we saw in the last couple of years. With the new administration in the US, the focus is shifting towards supply security, which has always been part of the conversation. We definitely need to also bring the focus on insurance and lower farm credit in order to unlock more cash flows on farm, which we're yet evolving into that conversation. But I would say now, in turning the corner from the early adopters to mainstream customers, you see just like a normal adoption curve where you have many more people making smaller investments compared to few people making very large investments when they want to be leading. And ultimately, we as Regrow believe that our science and technology can support a whole array of adoption pathways, whether someone wants to be directly working with us, working with a partner of ours, working with an institution, an NGO, etc. We have such a broad range of partners that we're not hung up on whether someone sees a Regrow logo when they use our science or our technology. We believe that the most scalable science that is credible will be able to lead the transition, and we work globally and are pretty excited about the continued growth in this space.
One thing that I want to talk about next, we're going to pivot here, talking about this space that I think has been neglected by a lot of the industry, is a focus on what you're really passionate about, which is resiliency, right? And since World War II, the eye of agriculture globally has always been focused on really purely production and yield, right? But why do you believe it is important that we move beyond that and have a greater mindset on resiliency?
Thank you for framing the question that way, because my grandmother and great grandmother have seen World War II. They've seen German troops in Ukraine when my grandma was young, and they have gone through famine. And they, as many Europeans, have depended on the United States and other nations to help restore Europe after the war, where there was maybe no piece of land left to farm safely because, after the warfare. So there was a very good reason to optimize for that. And I think when we pick the metrics and optimize for them, we are very good at it as humans. So what we should do, which I think is underway, it's not a super new idea, is to take externalities into account. So if we are investing in systems that are ultimately long-term more extractive, we are actually not just bearing the cost and pushing it down the hill. We're actually starting to see some of that cost occur in near real time, because there's more and more disruption of agricultural supply chains. Taking out a single supplier out of a supply chain through a flood or a drought that technically seems like it's not connected to farming practices, but we know agriculture contributes a lot of greenhouse gases, up to a third, depending on the accounting methodology of the world's greenhouse gases. And so if we warm up the atmosphere so much and do not conserve soil, we then see the loss of the productive area and the loss of the inputs and the loss of topsoil, and with it, the loss of productivity, the loss of opportunity for the businesses that depend on that supply chain. What I'm describing is a very physical risk forward approach to supply chain resilience. There's, of course, another one, which is resilience is the ability of the whole system to recover and adapt. And for agriculture, apart from the value chain, this means that the farms can stay profitable in the face of climate risk. And that would help, in turn, the supply chains to also be able to trace and finance the performance of those farms. That's how we see the interconnectivity between the two, and the importance of resilience as starting to take ownership of something that will be unsurmountable if we're not going to start taking care of it now.
What do you think is the biggest risk that is under-acknowledged or not acknowledged right now in terms of resiliency?
It's a great question, Paul. I think currently, if we look at the price of climate change in the food prices, I think that is probably the biggest unacknowledged impact of climate change that's already present. There was a UK study that I think was released last year that attributes a significant portion of the food price inflation directly to climate change. And I think not paying attention to that, not acknowledging it, not linking the two to the fact that warming atmosphere directly impacts farming processes and the current incentives on farm do not allow it to invest in resilience independently. We are just staring down the hill and are wondering why prices are going up. It's because we're taking from one place and not reinvesting back into it. That's exactly what it looks like.
Now, with that, I wanted to bring up something that's been in the news in the last week here, and I really am excited to have an expert in this field on this, because I think it's really important to look at, people in the media talking about this conversation of climate change and agriculture. And somebody that's been a big proponent of climate change over many years, Bill Gates, has kind of shifted his tone a little bit on climate change with a newly released paper that he wrote. I think he released it last week from when we're recording this. And in it, he states, although climate change has had serious consequences, particularly for people in poorer countries, it will not lead to humanity's demise. But this is a chance to refocus on the metric that should count even more than emissions and temperature change, which is improving lives. Our chief goal should be to prevent suffering, particularly those in the toughest conditions of the world. Climate change is not going to wipe out humanity, but past efforts that strive for achieving zero carbon emissions have made real progress, but they've also had past investments that fighting climate change has been misplaced and too much good money has been put into expensive and questionable efforts. So with framing that, I'm sure you're probably are up to date on his paper there. And what do you make of that as an expert in the field? And does that change how people should look at it or how you look at it?
I'm reminded of the time when this information became available online, and we were sitting with a close friend who also works in sustainability and leads on agriculture and sustainability at a known food company, and we were discussing it from a perspective of this is something that we're dedicating our life's work to. How does this message change what we believe is true, and how will it impact the world around us? So we have been at Regrow, a privileged recipient of the funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation some years ago. We have just wrapped up the 5-year project, I believe, that was focused on sub-Saharan Africa, deployment of decision support tools in order to help the breeders locally pick better varieties and suggest the management practices that could actually help lift the communities locally. And we feel like that was an important contribution. I think this type of project really shows you that no matter what you're looking at, no matter the side you're looking at it with, it's the same thing you're looking at. It's the same thing we've talked about for the last almost 20 minutes, that if you see the current things that are happening in the world, the way you see them is by marginalized communities, by communities that do not have enough, by communities that live off of subsistence farming, suffering, and going to be misplaced. If we if we take the single focus on climate solutions, we can then find ourselves in places where it's more techno-driven solutions, which I'm not saying we don't need them. I think we need every solution to make sure we don't get the planet off the rails. And Johan Rockström at the Potsdam Institute of Climate is showing that we, from the previous Climate Week, New York Climate Week, to this Climate Week, we have reached yet another planetary boundary. So I think 6 out of 7 of them already are out of whack. So at some point, we can start messing with the system to a point where we would mess up the global rainfall cycle and other things that we cannot fully predict and control. To me, the climate science is undeniable. From how I see it personally, if personalities like Bill Gates choose to look at the problem from a people side rather than a carbon accounting side, it's fine by me. It was an important book that he wrote, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. We all read it. It basically says there's 51 gigaton we're pumping into the atmosphere every year. We have to do something with it. We have to reduce it. We have to take it out of the atmosphere. I still believe we have to do that work. I personally think it's optimistic to think that by not focusing on it, we can make significant and meaningful progress, given we are very much behind. Just to give you a sense from a sober and scientific perspective, we often speak about the 1.5 Celsius degree warming trajectory that was ratified by the Paris Agreement in 2015, a point that made impact on my career and a lot of people who became a lot more aware of climate and the specific scientific nuances of the trajectories. Now, people are talking about 2.5 degree Celsius warming, 4.2 degree warming, and even 8 degree warming in a 20 to 30 year time horizon, which is, Paul, for you and I, absolutely within our lifetimes, and for all of our listeners probably as well. So if you think that in 20 years, the earth can completely transform itself if we don't do what's enough and if we don't do what's needed, I don't think we have the capacity outside of science fiction to comprehend what that looks like. So that is a long answer of what the statement of Mr. Gates makes me feel. So I admire his focus on communities that need support and need care. as a scientist, I also cannot be staring away from the data. If anything, we have more data, more clarity, more understanding of where to go and focus. And I can say that whilst the public narrative changes and some of the big agenda items get restated with different words, what encourages me is that we don't stop doing the work as far as our industry is concerned. Don't know what everyone else is doing. I am hearing that they're also doing the work, but we're over here doing the work and need more people to join it.
Do you think we as an industry need to reframe it and maybe give it a new branding or really talk about what we were just talking about earlier, which is resiliency, and talk about resiliency, not just climate change, because that brings in my mind, that brings in more of the overall aspects of what Bill Gates is talking about, but also what you're talking about, and also from a farmer perspective of making a living, right? Bringing all those pieces together.
Whether we want to talk about unpredictability of the weather on the farm or soil health under a different banner or not, I think is a nuance that's worth paying attention to. I personally have chosen resilience as the way of rallying the troops behind it for the last 3 years. And this was a choice with the help of my team that was made very thoughtfully. We were thinking about what is the biggest ROI that we can orient everyone towards, that we can excite them about doing this work. It's not carbon. Regrow has never talked about carbon publicly. It's something that we understand. It's a metric. It's one of the metrics. It's not the only one. There's a lot of ecosystem metrics.
Yeah, you're not siloed like a lot of the scientists that are outside of agriculture. They're siloed in their one thing, whether that be carbon or biodiversity or whatever. You're bringing all those things together.
I think everyone's who's working on it is trying to bring these things together, frankly. And I think it's very important for us to focus on what is a unifying narrative, whether it's across the aisle or across the dinner table or across generations of families. There are unifying messages. Every farmer, every person tending to the land, and even if they don't call themselves a farmer, wants that land to be inherited by the next generation of their family. That's true for my family. It's probably true for yours. It's probably true for so many people we know. And it doesn't matter whether we think we should call this unpredictable reality of atmospheric events that are becoming more frequent and amplitudes are higher, one thing or another. We all know this is the world we're living in, and we know there's systematic changes that we need to implement, that we can and are motivated to implement. So to me, focus on resilience is so much more important now, more than ever.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the examples that you have in the role that you've been in on collaboration across the supply chain for building resilience. So can you share a couple of maybe collaborative examples that you believe really moved the needle on some of the stuff that you've been working on?
Yes, absolutely. There's a number of different projects that we work on with companies. Some of them are they generally fall into 2 or 3 types of projects. One project type is working directly with the company's suppliers. Another one would be working directly with farmers because they have vertically integrated supply chains. And maybe the third one is a landscape level collaboration across companies and with additional partners who might be nonprofits, who might be government bodies. And we have plenty of examples in each category, whether we look at initially Kellanova working with their rice farmers and helping them improve the irrigation system so that rice doesn't emit as much methane by standing in water when it's not needed, and being able to help farmers get their products and stories on shelf at Walmart. Like, that's an example of a vertically integrated story. The example of working with a supplier is Oatly, for example, working with their grain suppliers to establish new supply chains and to transition farmers to regenerative agriculture. Not because Oatly wants to do that selfishly. Sure, they understand the value and that's part of their mission, but also because farmers care and want to support with it. And there's so many brands, countless brands that work that way with their suppliers, that Regrow supports them in that way. Then a good collaborative example would be General Mills and PepsiCo and Sustainable Food Lab collaborating on the Red River Basin project, where they are aligning on the outcomes they want to see. They're aligning on the support they want to provide to the farmer, usually technical support. So often the blockers to adoption of regenerative agriculture. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir to a lot of people that hopefully on their machinery or in their trucks listening to us. So they probably know, but if you know how to do it, if you have your neighbor who you can ask questions, or you have an agronomist who you can ask questions, and financially the risk is taken care of, someone is paying for the cover crop seed, or is helping you buy that no-till drill, or is helping you cover as a warranty any yield loss or yield dip that you have, those are the types of things that these companies are doing and are offering, either within that project or more broadly. And when we're seeing these landscape level collaborations, it means that farmers get approached about fewer programs, they get more support, and it's more focused so that we can, in a lasting way, transition farmers to regenerative and to help them build more profitable enterprises for themselves, their families, their communities.
We touched on it just a minute ago. You'd mentioned it, but there's a bit of a fear among some farmers about technology and how it'll be used in the future. How do you see regenerative practices and technology complementing each other in the future?
This is something that we've already talked about because it runs in my blood. I had in my family a lot of technologists that had their fingers, boots, often knees in the dirt. I believe in the framing of it as being technology and tradition. I think innovation, despite the fact that it's often seen that way, is not actually replacing the farmer wisdom. And it often works to amplify it by providing the evidence and the market access for it. The way that technology and tradition really should work is by scaling the acknowledgement and the financial remuneration of indigenous practices. We are not technologically inventing anything about regenerative agriculture. What we're trying to do is to incorporate the externalities of the soil loss, of the nutrient loss, of the loss of infiltration and soil water holding capacity of the soils, so that when they're restored, the farmer can get the benefit financially for those ecosystem services.
All right. So before we wrap up here, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you see looking ahead. What's the next frontier for agricultural resilience?
Great question. I feel amiss that we're not talking about AI in this episode. I don't think it's so central to everything we need to talk about, but it's worth mentioning that we're getting better at scaling our knowledge. It's not replacing people's creativity. It's not replacing people's executive function, strategic planning, strategic decisions. But take Regrow. Over the last 9 years, we'll turn 9 mid-November, so probably by the time you all listening to this, congratulate us with our 9th anniversary. We've built so much information, so much knowledge, and scaling it when we have new people coming onto the team, when we have new customers coming on to our partner platform, it's so much easier with AI. I think the frontier of agricultural resilience is not an AI, but the scale of powering agricultural resilience is probably within AI. Like, look at our internal applications of AI within the core IP of Regrow. We can scale remote sensing based detection of farming practices with AI so much further because our teams, and I'm grateful to each and one of them, have invested into generative AI approaches to remote sensing before anyone else did. This was like a crazy research project when we first did it. And so it's fantastic that now it's so mainstream and it's acknowledged that this is a tool set that if you try hard enough, you'll be able to apply it to other areas, which is what our team did. Outside of these vertical, super specific applications, I think AI can really scale the availability of this data, the decision support, and therefore the financing. And I think the next frontier, answering your actual question, the next frontier is when the insurers and bankers, as well as governments, come to the table having counted their risks and losses and are willing to invest a portion of them into supply chains ahead of time. It is inevitable, and that is what underwriting for ag resilience would look like.
That's very, very interesting. I like that. As we wrap up, just wanted to touch one more point. I really appreciate having founders on this podcast and the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that you have in that role. As a founder, what continues to inspire you every day when things get tough?
It's a question that often my team asks me, and I ask myself. What inspires me every day is small wins and real human stories. If we haven't seen every new hectare, every new field, every new farmer that signs up, changes practices, gets outcomes and says, this is working for me, it's worth doing everything we've been doing for. It is worth it.
All right. Well, Anastasia, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find out more about what you do and more about Regrow?
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul, for having me. Just want to reflect first that what you're doing, connecting personal experiences with systemic change is very special. And I think that's exactly how we make resilience real in agriculture. Everyone can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just into the connection note, please put, I've listened to AgCulture with Paul, and here's what I wanted to talk to you about, because otherwise I would not have the context of responding to you. So this is where it's best to find me. And if anyone wants to look into what we do at Regrow, of course, check out our website, regrow.ag, and get in touch with my team. Would be happy to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast with Anastasia Volkova. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, as always, if you would share it with somebody that you know, we really appreciate that. And if you would like to get a hold of Anastasia or check out what she's doing at Regrow, check out our show notes. The links will be in there for that. Also, I did want to mention, if you haven't yet and you would like to go to my website, paulwindemuller.com, where I have downloaded my Nuffield Scholarship paper on artificial intelligence and livestock. So if you want to check that out, go to paulwindemuller.com, download the paper. You'll find it there if you have not done that yet. All right, with that, I just want to say thank you once again for listening. It's been 100 episodes. I cannot believe it's been 100 episodes. I really appreciate all the support, the encouragement that I've gotten over the last 2 years, and the great people that I've been able to get connected with and interview on this podcast. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. If you have any other guests that you know of that would be great fit for our podcast, please send them our way or reach out to me. I would love to get a hold of them and just bring out more interesting stories and unique stories from around the world in agriculture. So with that, I'm Paul Windemuller. Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast. We'll see you next week.